Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about relationships. Maybe you're looking for love. Maybe you're in a relationship and maybe you've lost that loving feeling. We have a wonderful guest here who is going to enlighten us on how to build wonderful relationships, the invisible love dance. We have Karen Aberle here, and Karen actually comes to us from Interview Valet. So Interview Valet, Tom Schwab and his team have been absolutely amazing in terms of introducing me to amazing guests, and Karen is no exception. She has been teaching this for many, many years. I'm going to give her the opportunity to share her background with you and why this is so important to her. She also has a leadership program called Mindful Collaboration. She's been teaching it for 30 years. And so what she's teaching here in terms of relationships, of course, certainly applies in the business world as well as the personal relationships that we encounter. So I'm just really excited to have her here today. So Karen, welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Thanks, Nicole. I am so delighted to be here.
Well, you know what? This is a long time coming. We actually rescheduled this a little bit and we planned it out and because I was doing some traveling and it's actually a timely subject given I've had some wonderful experiences recently in the area of relationships. And so as I was reading your book, I'm like, yep. Oh, okay. Some interesting things there. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Now, before we go any further, I also, of course, want to welcome our listeners and our viewers. We're really excited that you're here because you're the reason why we do this show. We want to inspire you. Would love to be able to, personally, I love connecting with great people and bragging on people who are doing amazing things in the world. But I also want to be able to share that so that you can be inspired to be the difference maker that you're capable of being. And I really do believe that every single person has a story, has a message that needs to be shared. And so I hope this actually inspires you to take something, maybe a challenge in your life that you can turn into an opportunity to share a message with others and to be able to encourage people, help people to live their best life as well. I also want to celebrate because I have I co-authored a book. So this is my first book that's going to be coming out, and I'm really excited about it. It comes out in February. This is 2019, so it's going to come out in a few weeks. And it's called Power Up Superwomen. And it is a compilation book of a number of authors from around the world talking about their stories of encouragement through their stories of struggle and disappointment. And so they're sharing their stories to be able to encourage women to power up and so that you can be the amazing superwoman that you're capable of being. So if you're interested in a copy of that, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com. It's on the resource page and you can order your copy for that book. And there's actually many of the authors in the book have actually been on this podcast. So you will have heard them, Judy Chai, Linus Woods Mullins. It's dangerous when I start naming off names because I'm going to forget somebody. Amy Waninger, which her interview came out recently. So just a wonderful group of women, and I'm sure you'll be inspired by them. So go get a copy of that. Now back to Karen. Karen, let's talk about, I think to set some context for your expertise in this area, I think it would be important to share your story, your backstory, why this subject is so important, near and dear to your heart.
Sure. Well, like most people, I've fallen in love more than a couple of times. And the first time I was 19, and I thought, oh my God, this is my prince, and I'll spend the rest of my life with you. And I was married for about 6 years, had 2 kids, and then my husband decided one day that he was gay, and that marriage ended. I married again, fell in love again, and that marriage ended in a few years also. And mostly I was walking around in this conversation called, what's wrong with them? Can you find a good man? I mean, really difficult. Then I fell in love again. And I fell in love with a man who was from another country, 14 years younger. And falling is, you just fall. And 7 years into our marriage, it was not working well. And he and I had both been students of the philosophy of language. And we thought because we had learned how to communicate so well, that we would be able to manage all of our difficulties, and it did not turn out to be so true. 7 years in, things were falling apart, and I realized this is not a mental issue. It's not something that I have to figure out. We were in therapy, it wasn't working. And I had the good fortune to meet a shaman. And the shaman said, your problem here is not of an intellectual basis, it's a spiritual issue. And he sent me off with some good preparation to do a vision quest, which I don't know if you know what they are. They're traditional rituals done in most indigenous communities, of taking a time when you're transitioning in life or transforming in life to a new place. And I sat on a mountain in Mexico for several days and nights with no food, no place to go, nothing to do or read or anything but sit. And there I had the most incredible vision of the sacred interconnectedness of life. And that was missing for me, and it was missing for us in our relationship, recognizing how we are connected and recognizing the lack of honor that had invaded our relationship. So, you know, when you're falling in love and everything is fun and easy and nice, you're just crazy about the person and you never want to say go to hell. But after some differences and challenges and conflicts and life shows up, we found that we had been really diminishing one another for our failures at reconciling our differences. And so I went back to New York, where we were living at the time, shared my vision with my husband, and that was 23 years ago. And he actually sought his own vision quest, and we walked for 18 years on the path of the Huichol Indians of central Mexico, where we really learned what it is to listen to the world, what it is to honor life. And a 30-year relationship is wonderfully adventurous and passionate, and we can't believe it. You know, we're sitting here saying, wow, this is really, who would have ever imagined it? So that's a little bit of the background. What I have discovered and what Love's Invisible Dance is really all about is an introduction to love as a domain of learning, as a domain of mastery. It's not just a feeling that you have. Yeah, we feel love, but actually love is a domain of action, and you can learn how to do it. And, you know, who teaches you this?
It's another one of those life skills that should be taught. I don't like shoulds. I don't like saying should, but it would benefit us to be taught when we are going through school at some point in our life. To be able to learn that, I think is really valuable. And you said some things there that were very interesting. Number one, the fact that even when things get difficult, I think there's some misconception that relationships, and I know this personally, having been in a relationship with someone who had this kind of concept that, it's all supposed to flow. It's supposed to be easy and effortless and like, yeah, and it takes work. It takes an investment. There's more to it than just letting it happen. In order to create a relationship the last 30 years. I mean, my parents both passed now, but they were married for 49 years. And there were some good times and there were some not so good times. And watching them through this process, being very close to them and being in business with them and being kind of in the middle at some points in time in this, realizing that it was an investment, and to watch them and their relationship flourish, even in the most difficult times through that, it's really incredible. And so congratulations on on your wonderful relationship there. Now, the other thing is you mentioned about getting quiet, having the vision quest and being quiet. I think there's one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's in this listening, there's so much noise out there, and social media is not helping relationships. It's great. You can meet more people and have these acquaintances, quote unquote friends, which are really more like acquaintances. But there's so much noise out there and so much pulling us away from actually being present with other people. And we can also look at the other side and say, the grass is greener over there. Look how amazing that person. We see the highlight reel. And so there's so many dynamics going on right now, more than ever. And so, you know, in your book, you talk about some of the things that are, there's a name for it. Oh, shoot, and I forgot it. And I've read your book. By the way, this is a copy for people that are watching, Love's Invisible Dance. Those of you listening, you can get that on Amazon. And 7 Keys to Authentic, Joyful, and Lasting Relationship. That's by Karen. And so you talk about in there some keys. So can we maybe just dive into those and what are those keys and how can we apply those to building better relationships?
Well, first of all, we need to be attracting other people. You know, we need to be attractive. What I say and I show, I think pretty well in the book, is that we are constantly in relationship with other people and we're always dancing with them. We're dancing, you and I, right now. You know, so you're doing something and I'm doing something and we interact, and love is a way in which we bring ourselves together in union. And in order to love, we need to attract others. We need to be seen as someone attractive to dance with. And this is particularly challenging for a lot of women because we get stuck in the idea of attractiveness as something on a magazine cover, or, you know, what Cosmopolitan is telling us is attractive. And so we need to come to terms with who we are and understand that there's nothing really more attractive than someone who has confidence, someone who's open, grateful, in a mood of wonder. Who doesn't want to be around somebody like that? We have to be in a place of self-acceptance. And the first key in Love's Invisible Dance is that we need to recognize ourselves as constantly becoming, constantly learning. So we fail, and we can't use our failures as a source of diminishment. We have to use them as building blocks for our growth. And when we can accept that we're learners, and we can accept that we are constantly, you know, take what happened that might be a failure and say, I learned from it. So it turns this burden into a gift when we find the learning there.
Yeah. Well, just on that point, it's interesting because I when my husband, who's now my ex-husband, but my husband who, the first time around, when he decided he didn't want to be with me anymore and this wasn't working out, and he ended up going through doing a number of things that were, you know, destructive to our relationship. And I took it personally. You know, here I had all this personal development. You talk about the intellectual, right? All intellectually and even emotionally, you know, like I had done a lot of inner work. And yet I took it personally. What's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not pretty enough. I wasn't enough for him. What does he need from me? And so I started going through this whole process. We were still together, living separately, but under the same roof. And I was trying to do everything to fix the relationship. I was trying to do everything to fix me so I could be like, because obviously there must have been something wrong with me. And mm-hmm. I went through this process, and then it got to the point where I realized this wasn't about so it was a gift. The point is, it was such a gift for me because I got to realize that I hadn't fully accepted myself. And the second time around, when we actually got back together, and we were actually right at the point of getting divorced. We were actually at the courthouse filling out the paperwork, and he said, "Wait a second, I think I want to reevaluate this." And anyway, long story short, we ended up getting back together. But I said to him, I said, "I just want to be clear so that we're not," because we were separate he had moved out and he was gone for a while, 2.5 years. And I just said, "I want to be clear that when we're coming into this relationship, I'm coming differently into this relationship than what you experienced me the first time around." And I believe that to have a healthy relationship, we have to have two whole and complete people coming together, right? So it's not, you're not completing me. I'm good either way. I'm good. I feel good. I love myself. I love life. I'm happy. I'm joyful with or without this relationship. I'd love to have this relationship with you, but I'm okay either way. And it was such a different approach for me to relationships, rather than trying to be who I needed to be, or to, that's beautiful in movies, right? You complete me. It sounds so lovely and romantic. It doesn't work in reality because that person cannot complete you.
Right. Yeah. But you can form a union.
Yes.
And this takes me really to the second key, because when you're in that place, it's a good place to start. But then there's more. And that is that you're entering into a long-term engagement, a long-term dance with someone. And what's absolutely essential is that both partners be committed to mastering the dance that they're doing. So love is a dance of action. And, if you've ever studied tango, or, something a little bit more organized than just, dancing yourself on a dance floor, to dance with a partner is really challenging. Someone's leading, someone's following. And if you don't know what the moves are, if you don't know what the steps are, if you don't know what the dance is that you're doing, you're likely to be stepping all over one another.
Yeah.
And so the second key in Love's Invisible Dance is that you have to learn the moves. And there are only 6 of them. And there are just these 6 moves that we as human beings are doing all the time, with everyone and everything and ourselves, speaking, listening, and thinking. We can only be moving in one of 6 ways. And if you don't know what they are, what are you talking about? What are you listening to? What is the intention that I have in communicating with you? What am I trying to do with you? So I need to understand the moves. And we request of one another, we offer one another, we promise one another. And, who taught you how to make an effective request in your life?
Yeah, they were more like demands, is what we learned.
Yeah, and so
well.
I just got a note from someone who read the book, who said what was one of the most powerful things to me was that you said, to make an effective request, you need to give the other person full permission to say no without feeling rejected. Yeah. And this was huge for her. So we need to learn how to make those things, how to manage our promises, how to manage the non-fulfillment of our promises, because that's what produces trust. Yes. When we can be counted on. And then there are 3 other moves which allow us to see and reflect and to create the world. And that is, we state facts, we assert, we make opinions, we assess, and we declare. And declarations are things like, I pronounce you husband and wife. I pronounce you divorced. I'm going to learn to play the guitar. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Leaders declare, we're going to open a market in China. So assessing and asserting are really tricky, because a lot of people often think that their opinions, their assessments, are the truth in the world. And it's very trust busting to try to convince someone that your opinion is the truth. So being able to make those distinctions of what am I doing right now? What am I saying? What am I listening to? Are you stating a fact to me? Are you giving me your opinion? These allow us to move much more harmoniously, much more gracefully together.
Well, and you mentioned in the book there about beliefs. I love this, like truth and fact, your truth or opinions and fact. I haven't heard it described that way. And I thought, yeah, that's so true. It's like you're asserting or you're assessing. Brilliant. The way you just you define that, so it makes it clear for us to understand the distinction. And I think that's one of the things that really, like you just said, holds us back, because we believe it's like, people say that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, that's an opinion.
Yeah.
Right. And
right.
I have an opinion, you have an opinion. And so, it's seeing, as you talk about in the book as well, in which I've learned, it's like, one of my mentors used to say, go into their world first, right? Understand, like to truly be present with someone, to be truly willing, like in that dance, is to be open and not attached to your agenda, and just to be able to experience it. And even when I come into these podcasts, people usually say, guests will say, wow, it was just relaxing. It was this great conversation. And it's because I didn't have these questions like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to do, and you're going to follow. And how it's, it's just this dance. I love this. This is fun. It's much more fun that way than trying to control the outcomes all the time. But I think that's such an important piece there, this distinction between opinion and fact, and how much we live in opinion.
We have to.
And then we've got this right-wrong conversation about I'm right, you're wrong, zero-sum game, as opposed to what works and what doesn't work.
So here's one of the mind-blowing facts about opinions is that all opinions can be valid.
Yes.
And so you see the world as you see it, and I see the world as I see it. What we have the opportunity to do is to say which vision provides the greatest opportunity for us. We can choose the assessment that opens possibilities.
Yes.
And that's what most people are completely blind to, is that we have the opportunity to create our reality and our future by choosing assessments that are useful. We need to learn how to make assessments in a way that people feel contributed to by them, even when we're giving them critical assessments. Are you open?
Give us an example.
Yeah. So are you open to knowing my opinion about something that could be useful for you? That's generally advice is just offered. It's delivered before it's offered. And we want to think that we're competent, but not in everything. This is, I found, a big issue within the leadership and management ranks of these major corporations, because how you get to look good is by knowing. And if somebody's going to tell you something different or tell you something that you don't know, there's a lot of defensiveness that shows up.
Oh,
so
yes.
We need to be, if we take the position of, I am committed to mastery in this domain, I am committed to learning. Look at professional athletes, performers, they're all open to coaching. They say, show me how I could do better at this. And we need to be able to accept these critical assessments with a thank you, instead of well, you don't know what you're talking about, or, you don't know what I know. So there's so much defensiveness that we have learned in school in this culture of looking good. Looking good equals knowing. So
well, and even thinking that they should know, having coached entrepreneurs and business owners, business leaders, CEOs, there's different levels of it, and the higher they get up in companies and larger the company is, of course, the more they think they should know, and oftentimes. But it's this idea that, yeah, I'm supposed to know it. I don't know how many times I've had a business owner who said, I'm supposed to know this. Like, I shouldn't have to ask.
Uh-huh.
And I said, really? Like, why do you think that? Where does that come from?
Right.
How are you supposed to know everything about everything, in every
Whatever.
aspect of
Yeah.
your business? That's why professional, like you said, coaches, they may not be the expert or the most successful in that field of, let's say, for example, sports, but they're a great coach and they can break it down. You have a batting coach, you have a pitching coach, you have all these different types of coaches because they specialize in those areas, and you can bring the best of all of those people. But in order to do that, you have to be humble and be open to hearing what they have to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to learn how to make assessments, and we need to be able to offer the grounding or the evidence or the support for those assessments, not because they'll be true. They will never become true, but they will become an option.
Yes.
And, getting away from, you said beliefs before. Beliefs are assessments that you want to hold as facts. I sat next to a man on an airplane once who was reading the Bible, and he asked me if I had declared Jesus Christ as my personal savior, which I had not. And he was very sorry for me because he was sure I was going to hell. But he was holding his belief like the truth in the world. And for me, that was unfortunate. And that's what we do.
It's interesting because being a Christian myself, and having experienced the judgment and the, like, this is the way it is, and this is we're the exclusive group. And, and it's interesting, and it's unfortunate because a lot of people have shut themselves out to it for that reason, because of the way that they experience it through others. I heard somebody say once that Jesus is a lot more inclusive, or was a lot more inclusive than we realize. But that's, again, human nature coming into this. I have an opinion. I'm right. You're wrong. Mm-hmm. And then when we do that, when we go into this right-wrong conversation, we, in your words, like that assessment, my opinion is the right opinion, is the fact, then we actually close the door. We close the opportunity for any other further conversation. It becomes a defense. Now you're going to prove to me why you're right, and then where are we going from there? It's nowhere. And this doesn't work in business. It doesn't work in any area. It doesn't work personally in relationships, because life is all about relationships. And that's why it's one of the most important life skills.
If we go back to the idea of listening as key, I mean, how do you honor someone? You listen generously. You speak kindly. You express gratitude and appreciation. And in listening generously, what we do is we stop our private internal conversation and listen to what the other person has to say. And the goal here is to be able to say, I can see why you say that.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it right, like true.
Yes.
But I can see why you say that. Given your background, given your experience, given your proclivities, I can see why you say that. And that is so validating.
That's the difference between acknowledgement and agreement. Some people think, I don't want to acknowledge it because then I'm agreeing. No, those are two different things.
Right.
You can acknowledge somebody's viewpoint and not agree with it.
Yeah.
Or take it on as your own, but you can acknowledge it and say, I can see why you say that. It's kind of like handling objections in sales. People go, yeah, but, right? No, that's not the way it is. Mm-hmm. Well, that's never going to get you a sale.
Right.
But if you say, wow, I understand why you might say that. Thank you. Even just acknowledging, you mentioned in your book about saying thank you. I'm a big advocate of gratitude, and even just expressing, not just feeling it, but expressing it. and saying thank you. I think it's becoming a lost art. You know,
It
people
is.
ask a question, somebody answers a question, and then they don't actually even acknowledge that they answered the question. It takes
Right.
courage to give your opinion. It takes courage, even talking about relationships. It takes courage for one person to actually be vulnerable and share and say, this is how I feel right now. And if you
Yeah.
don't acknowledge that, you're breaking trust, as you were talking about. You're not building trust that way.
Right. And, a full expression of gratitude uh, can include a lot more than thank you.
Yes.
Tell you what it meant to me, how I felt about it, the contribution that I experienced. All of that really empowers relationship.
Mm.
Thank you is fairly easy for some people, but it also gives short shrift to gratitude too, when you stop and think about how can I let you know how meaningful this was to me.
Yes. Well, and
Yeah.
that's not just an intellectual thing, because it's interesting. Years ago, people say thanks, thanks.
Mhm.
I find
Yeah,
thanks is like kind of a flippant thing. That's just my
it
personal
is. Yeah.
opinion. And
Yeah.
so I say, if you're going to give gratitude, at least say thank you. And like you said, then you can expand on it. But this thanks, that's just my own opinion on that.
Opinion.
Yes.
Yes.
Speaking of
Well, you
opinion.
know what, Nicole? I can see why you say that.
Oh my goodness. So Karen,
Yeah.
so what do we do? So we talked a couple of the aspects you talked about in your book. And
Talked about language, talked
moves.
about
Yes.
learning.
Yes.
And what I'd like to share with you is that, and I'm working on another book now, which is called The Fourth R. And uh, you know, my original question is, where did you learn how to love? Where did you learn how to be in relationship? In school, we have the three R's. And why is it that we're not teaching relationship, which is the most fundamental human skill? To be alive is to be in relationship. And in the love relationship, um, I have articulated three commitments. I'd say they're the only three commitments that a partnership needs to make to one another in order to have a joyful, sustaining, passionate relationship. And so I'd like to share them with you.
Please.
The first one is, you are a treasure to me. How do you treat a treasure? Do you speak kindly, listen generously, express appreciation, gratitude? The second is, your concerns are my concerns. I speak about that in the book as the foundation for partnership. When two people say, your concerns are mine, then we have to work towards getting the other satisfied, even when they want something different than what we want.
Yes.
The third commitment, and this is the tie it up in a bow, is I live in the question, how can I love you more? And owning that, saying, it's, I love you is insufficient. I want to love you more. How can I do that? Well, I could look back at treating you like a treasure, and what have I done that hasn't been treasuring, and how do I correct that? How do I apologize for that? How do I practice speaking in a way that's more loving? And then the second one is, when I don't take your concerns as my own. When the differences get in the way and I say, well, I gave to you last time, and all of that doesn't work.
Yeah.
No. So the thing is that we have to be able to, and this is a huge domain of learning, is to find a context that is bigger than both of us. So, for example, my husband and I were looking for a coffee table. This is so plebeian, but we looked for this coffee table for 7 years because we couldn't find one that met both of our concerns. Finally, we found one, you know, because he wanted something that was obscure. I wanted something that was glass. Took some time, but we weren't willing to compromise. Yeah, compromise is a good thing. It's fine if you don't compromise with regret or resentment. But we both were very strong in our desire to have this thing. And with our commitment to each other's concerns, we just had to keep looking.
It's interesting when you that is in itself, that example is a great example of relationship, how a relationship works in terms of how it makes it successful, I guess, is taking the time to get to that rather than one person saying, fine, I'll just give in and get whatever you want, or fighting about it and then parting ways because you can't come to an agreement because you can't believe that there's or you don't believe that there's a possibility for you to find what it is that you're looking for. There's so much in there, actually, when I was listening to you that just struck me. It's like, wow, that's such a profound example. And it comes back when you said earlier, which I didn't touch on at that point, but it did stand out for me, is love is an action. It's a choice. And I had learned this, that because I even had people who said to me, you know, how could you love him? Even now, I mean, we're not married anymore. I absolutely love him. It's his choices that he's made, and and I accept those. That's his choice. Disappointing. Right. I wanted to be in a relationship. I chose to be in a relationship. I was committed to a relationship for life, but it takes two people to have that commitment to do that. But when I'll say to people, I absolutely still love him today, and he knows it. Sure. And I've shared it with him and wished him happy birthday recently and said, I absolutely love you, always will.
I love all my ex-husbands.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it's more than that warm, fuzzy feeling. When you love someone, you want to bring their concerns and have their concerns be your concerns. You want to listen to them. It actually makes it so much when you get to that point. But in order to get to that point, of course, you have to first love yourself in order to love others and to be able to have that capacity to love, because it's a love that comes, it's like it overflows and it comes into your, spreads out into your relationships. But I love those 3 points because that really does speak to, practically speaking, okay, love is a choice, but how do I live that out? What does that look like?
Right. So, if love is a domain of mastery, coaching is essential.
Yeah.
And, where do you go to learn? People do therapy, that's useful. In the book, we talk about learning communities. In the 70s, there were consciousness raising groups. Women came together all over the country in living rooms once a week to look at what is it to be a woman. And it changed our world. And I think that we need something similar in terms of what is it to be in relationship. And, what does it look like when we're masterful in relationship? The book lays that out, I think, really well. One of the things that it touches on, which is really challenging for people, is to learn how to tell the truth. Oh, to be radically authentic, because when we can be radically authentic with our lovers, we bring ourselves closer and closer together and expand our union in powerful ways. I start off that chapter by asking the question, do you want to be loved for who you truly are? Or do you want to be loved for who you pretend to be? Yeah. And so we have to really come to terms with our truths, the truths about ourselves, the truths about our lovers, the truths about the world, and to be able to speak them in a way that is not threatening, not damaging, not self-effacing. Why do we lie? We lie because we're ashamed. We lie because we're afraid we're going to hurt someone. And we have to learn how to communicate with one another in a way that isn't hurtful. Sometimes our ego gets hurt when we hear something that we didn't want to hear. But if we are committed to be learners, then we can be appreciative.
Yeah. So how do people find out about, you mentioned about coaching in the end, at the end of the book, you also talk about people working through it together. So what would be the next step? Somebody listens to this and says, wow, you know what? I have lost that loving feeling, like I talked about at the beginning, in my relationship. And I want to see if we can salvage this relationship. Right. We can restore it even better than before. Or somebody that is perhaps single, that is looking for, or divorced or whatever, that is looking for that next relationship, but wants to learn so that if they can be successful in that. What's the next step after buying? They buy the book. We'll make sure that we have the link to that in the show notes. And what happens after that? How can they work with you?
Well, they can go to my website, KarenAberle.com, and there are avenues for coaching. There are podcasts, there are videos, there are opportunities there. And I work with a network of coaches that I can refer for people who are interested in one-on-one or two-on-one kind of coaching or group coaching. So, anyone who says, I want to get better at this, how can I love you more, is really the question. That if you're ready to ask that question and to be in that question, then you should be talking to me.
Awesome. Karen, thank you so very much. Leaders are learners. You want to be a leader of transformation, it starts at home. It starts with transforming yourself. And it's interesting, you talked about knowing yourself, being true to yourself, knowing your own truth, your lovers, the world around you. I always talk about transforming the way you see yourself, the way you see others, and the way you see the world around you. So we're so aligned in that. And that is, as a leader of transformation, we're looking at those things on a regular basis. We're not just saying, okay, I got this. Every time in my life where I've thought, I got this, I get a surprise and I realize I don't have it yet. And there's always more to learn. It's like, they say the more you learn, the more you realize how much you have to learn. So I encourage you to go to KarenAberle.com, get a copy of her book. This is what it looks like for those of you watching. Love's Invisible Dance. Excellent for personal relationships. Excellent also for business relationships. Karen has we didn't talk about it here, an extensive experience working with CEOs, applying this information in business, in the boardrooms, in building teams. There's some really, really valuable lessons here that you can apply as a CEO, as a leader that is looking to make a huge impact. So I encourage you that. Go to KarenAberle.com for more information, be able to get some coaching from her as well. Karen, thank you so much for being here and inspiring us, and specifically showing us, not just in theory, but in practice, that it's possible. Because I think that's a big, nowadays, I hear so many times single women who say, can't find a good man. There's no more good men out there. And so the hope is being lost that it's possible. And if you don't think something's possible, well, it's going to be hard to create it, right? It's not going to happen. And so you're bringing hope and possibility, and with the practicality of it, sharing from your own stories. Really, really appreciate that. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Thank you for Leaders of Transformation. I think that when we learn how to be different, we're living in a world that is so polarized right now. When we really learn how to accept the differences of one another, we can transform this world. So Thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you.
My pleasure. Reminds me of a quote, says, unity is not conformity, it is diversity.
Mhm.
And I absolutely believe that. So leaders take action today. Get a copy of Karen's book. Apply what you've learned. She has shared so much of this. This might be one of those ones you go back and she just kind of casually shared some, tips and things that she has learned as she has become a master in this area. But there's so much value. Go back and listen to this. She offers some very, very amazing nuggets that you can apply right now, today, tonight, when you go home for dinner, and share some dinner with your partner, with your family, whoever. These are things that you can apply right away. And that's where the transformation happens, when we take action on what we learn. So I encourage you that. We look forward to hearing your stories. You can find us on Facebook at Leaders of Transformation, Twitter, it's Leaders Podcast. Of course, you can also go to leadersoftransformation.com. And as I said, we would love to hear your stories, how this has impacted you, and also what you're doing to make an impact in the world. So reach out to us, and we really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.